So, welcome back, everyone. It is the Global Privacy and Data Protection Leadership Meet 2022 brought to you by ASSOCHAM India. Now, once again, we begin with the webinar, resume the webinar, and we start with the inaugural session. Now, like I said, Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar will be joining us. But we just heard from the Honorable Minister's office that he is going to be at the airport to be receiving the special flights that are coming in from Ukraine, bringing back the Indian nationals that have been stranded amidst this entire conflict between Ukraine and Russia. But after that, the minister will be, in fact, on our program and will be talking to us. Meanwhile, we'll start with the session. Let me introduce you to all of our speakers during this inaugural session. We are being joined here by Mr. Lavneesh Channa. He's the chairman of the ASSOCHAM National Council on IT, ITES, and E-commerce. He's also the vice president, government affairs at APJ and SAP. And during this inaugural session, we also will be hearing to Mr. Supratim Chakraborty, partner at Khaitan and Company. We'll also be launching the knowledge report, and we have industry addresses by Ms. Kalindi Mehta, Vice President and Regional General Counsel for Asia Pacific and Japan SAP. Mr. Ashutosh Chadha, Director and Country Head, Government Affairs and Public Policy at Microsoft, will also be sharing with us his perspective. Mr. Aman Jain, Head of Government Affairs and Public Policy, Google India, also on this inaugural session to share with us his perspective. And of course, also joining us for the session is Mr. Ashwini Rana, co-chairman of the ASSOCHAM National Council on IT, ITES, and E-commerce and Public Policy Director at Meta India. So once again, an esteemed set of speakers this morning talking to us during this inaugural session. I'd like to begin by first of all inviting Mr. Lavneesh Chanda for his address to talk to all of us and give the welcome address.
So much, and my apologies for joining slightly late. And as always, when you need it the most, the systems will tell you that they are far more important than you are. So, my apologies. But on behalf of SOCHAM and all other stakeholders group, I really extend a very warm welcome to all attending and speaking at this very important webinar on data privacy. We have been thinking at SOCHAM on this area for quite some time now, and it's really heartening to see such a variety and such a wide spectrum of viewpoints coming together, over the deliberations that we will be having during the day. And we look forward to hearing from the minister as and when he joins later in the day, because you heard that. Because of his official engagements, so there could be a slight delay or rescheduling in that. Let me just set the context for this discussion, and then I can hand over to the speakers. The whole concept of the data protection, data privacy, and whatnot actually originates has its roots in the fast digital developments that we have seen. And as the Honorable Prime Minister says, that 2020s will be India's decade, and we are already seeing that in just the last years that we have acquired as the tech industry. We acquired more than $200 billion of revenue with more than 4.7 million workforce. And if the entrepreneurial developments are any indication of the way forward, the number of unicorns increasing by 160%. So the larger point that I'm trying to make as the starting is the foundation for this going forward is actually already in place. So there is no debate on what can be done and what cannot be done. And at the same time, some of the recent studies have shown that at 14 GB per person, the data being consumed in India is really among the top, and that is where the whole discipline of data protection, data privacy actually becomes very important. And for all of us in this room and attending this webinar, all of us have heard this multiple times that data today is the most important asset for companies, for individuals, and also for nations as a whole. And from that perspective, the requirement of the industry, government, and the other stakeholder group collaboration in bringing out a harmonious data protection regime is actually need not be overemphasized. Now, we have seen a number of policy prescriptions coming around in India. Some very unique in India way. Which are addressing the data-related requirements. Now, talking about the recently released the draft of the data accessibility and use policy, which is actually looking at creating more revenue sources and also ensuring seamless integration. So the developments are there for us to see every day. And coming to the topic today, this data protection bill that all of us are actually deliberating different parts of it today has actually undergone a long consultative process, and to that extent, the different stakeholder groups really need to be appreciated in terms of their constant engagement, in terms of their constant involvement going forward. And from the industry perspective too, we see some level of evolution. That is, the thought process is now changing from just complying to the data protection regulations or regimes to bringing the privacy into the product design itself. So that is something that the evolution is actually gaining maturity when it comes to technology projects. Now, the larger point that I want to leave you with the thought process is, as this process evolves, and I'm sure some of you will be speaking on the common areas of interest, whether it's cross-border data flows, data localization, social media, in terms of the inclusion of non-personal data into the personal data. I'm sure number of speakers after me will be presenting on their views on these areas. I think the larger thought process that we need to trigger is to move from a simple data protection regulation to a data protection program, and that program actually will require a huge effort on citizen awareness, a program that will require a huge effort on making SMEs understand how they can do and how can they actually go about that. A program that will require a regulatory regime which will actually promote this and also dovetail into the backend technology, developments around cloud, developments around the cross-border flows, the innovation, the global product development process, and whatnot. Now, that is the objective with which we thought we will actually hold and this particular summit. And thank you very much to all those uh, who actually agreed to speak. And we look forward to very interesting deliberations during the day, and also to listening to the Honorable Minister as and when he joins. I leave you with these thought process and look forward to very interesting deliberations. Thank you very much, and back to you, Stu.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Channa. It is time for me to now request Supratim Chakraborty, who is a partner with Khaitan and Company, to kindly present the theme of this webinar today, post which we'll also be launching the knowledge report.
Thank you, Lavnish. Actually, you made my job a little easier because you started with something which I really wanted to speak about, which is awareness at all levels. Okay, uh, because in our daily life, in our organization, still the last person on the floor is educated about data privacy and protection. Whatever money we spend in sophisticated tools and technologies, nothing can be successful. That's what we truly believe, and I'll demonstrate that with simple examples, day-to-day examples. Okay, so the first one, and all from real life, what we have been experiencing, I've been experiencing in this practice area. The first one is we were doing a diligence on a company, and we asked, "Are you handling sensitive personal data or information?" And the answer was that no, we are a simple company. We don't do that. And we started looking into the company. We saw biometric attendance at the gate. We saw a lot of medical information kept with the HR because of medical insurance, a lot of financial information which was kept with the payroll, guys. So I'm just saying that unless you are aware and educated enough, it is not possible that we will be successful in this particular journey. There are some others. I will maybe, as we go along, we'll speak about those. But I think I'll just move on. with the white paper inauguration. So we have really worked hard. Asucham and Ketan and company, we have come together to put together this particular white paper. And I'll tell you how we have gone about doing this. I think that's what would be important for this audience. So, firstly, we have the introduction part where what we have tried to do is give a snapshot or a bird's eye view, right from present day laws on data privacy and protection, the Information Technology Act, Sensitive Person Data Rules, all of those, to the PDP uh, Act, the bill, and then the Data Protection Act that we have, including the Joint Parliamentary Committee recommendations. Thereafter, we have gone into five most critical elements of the report, the Joint Parliamentary Committee report, and have dissected that. And we have talked about each of these five pockets in greater detail. Now, what are these five critical elements that we have picked up and deep dived into? One is non-personal data. The second one is data localization and cross-border data transfer. I think our speakers before this have already spoken quite a bit. Dipankar, for example, was talking and he was emphasizing on the importance and the details around data localization and cross-border data transfer. We have spoken about social media platforms, uh, data breaches, how it should be looked at differently as we are going ahead in this digital journey in the country. And finally, most critical, I would say, children's personal data. Okay, so these are the five pockets that we have deep dived into. When you look at our report, each of these pockets have been segregated further into categories such as details about each of these subjects, the observations of the Joint Parliamentary Committee, the committee's key recommendations, our analysis. And believe me, when I'm saying that we have done an analysis, it is like a threadbare deep dive analysis. It will be worth your time if you go through this paper. And finally, the suggestions. So I'll not take too much time here to go into each of these pockets and keep talking about it, but believe that you should go through. It'll be worth your time. This is the this is what we wanted to talk about as a theme, that from a patchwork of laws that we have in relation to data privacy and protection, including sectoral regulators giving their dictats for their players that they guide, to an omnibus umbrella legislation on data privacy and protection, is truly a leap of faith, and that is where we should aim to start our journey with. um, a quick snapshot of what we have as a law today. As I was mentioning to you, we do not have any single regulation. We have, say, the Information Technology Act, the Sensitive Personal Data Rules, and then there are sectoral regulators which are giving their dictats. Other legislations like Indian Penal Code, Indian Contract Act, Consumer Protection Act, all playing a patchwork of roles. From there to this journey, which is the upcoming data protection law. It's been a long one from July, August 2017. I have been part and parcel of this journey. Have been very fortunate to have discussed this personally with Justice Sri Krishna and many in this audience, including Sunil. We have really gone, I think, to many of these consultation meets. Collectively at Khaitan and Company, we have attended every single consultation meet that has taken place in the country. So we know exactly every sentence that is written there, why it is written, and helps us in dissecting the JPC recommendations better, because we are aware of the entire journey of this particular bill. What are we looking forward to? We are looking forward to an omnibus legislation with extraterritorial jurisdiction, stuffs like data localization and cross-border data transfer at par with international standards. New compliances, of course, would be coming in, like impact assessment, data protection officers, etc. Data breach response will become a little more, I would say, streamlined and at par with international standards. Then we have now got regulation of social media platforms. We have dissected it threadbare, and we have given some recommendations in our white paper on this. Heavy penalties and compensations, and there would be a dedicated, designated data protection authority. Why has this subject become a board level discussion? As you can see clearly, the reason is, one of the reasons is because the penalties would be now extremely steep, and they have been bucketized akin to international standards, say a GDPR equivalent categorization. I'm not going through in detail on this. The next obvious question which comes up is on timelines. How much time will I get when this law comes into effect? Well, about 24 months, which has been recommended, again, in tune with international standards. Applicability, like I was mentioning, it is applicable to organizations within India and also to foreign entities if they're carrying out business in India, if they're having any systematic activity of offering goods or services to entities in India, and also profiling of data principles in India. Lastly, what I would like to talk about is compliances. Yes, a lot of compliances would come in, but then again, a lot of it is a real necessity of the day, like privacy by design, transparency, security safeguards, breach notification, like I was mentioning, it will be very different, grievance redressal, data protection officer, and these last three, 6, 7, and 8 that you see, data protection officer keeping record, and audit impact assessment would be all in relation to significant data fiduciary, which is basically a higher category of data controllers, which will be further fine-tuned. Um, Everyone is talking about this one, data localization and cross-border data transfer. I'll just quickly tell you what is there in the present bill. Personal data can freely go out, no problem. Sensitive personal data should continue to be stored in India. However, there are some conditional transfers which are possible through explicit consent and intra-group schemes or adequacy decision or approve if it is approved for specific purposes. And if it is critical personal data, which is yet to be defined, it is to be processed in India, and under very, very stringent conditions can that transfer be permitted. So with that, I think I'll quickly wrap up. Nothing further from my side. I thank ASSOCHAM that we could partner and prepare this particular white paper. I'm sure you will enjoy it, and I wish all the success to this program. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. The white paper, you spoke about it, Mr. Chakraborty, and now it's time for us to release this report, the white paper, for our audiences to see.
Can we see the slide, page number 2 again, Supritamji? Thank you, Supritamji. This is the white paper that ASSOCHAM and along with the Kritan and company has prepared, and it will be available to all the participants on email in due course. Samriddhi, can we move on?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Varun, for our audiences to see. Once again, this white paper on privacy and data protection that's been prepared by ASSOCHAM and Khaitan and Company. Thank you once again, Mr. Chakraborty, for throwing some light on the contents of this report, this white paper. And we now move on to our next speaker. We have with us Ms. Kalindi Mehta, who is the VP and Regional General Counsel for Asia Pacific and Japan at SAP. And she'll be now talking to us about the industry perspective. Over to you, Ms. Mehta.
Thank you so much, Samriddhi, for the introduction. Very good afternoon to the panelists and guests, and thank you so much, Asojim, for the opportunity to present the views here. I think just today morning, I was looking at a picture where I could see hundreds of Russian citizens stranded at a metro station as probably the Apple Pay or Google Pay had stopped working. And my thoughts immediately went on how important it is to not only have a local digital currency, but also, why the act probably is talking about, localization and residency, especially for the critical data. Now, as an industry, there could be a different view, but, the thoughts are definitely going in one direction at the moment. So coming back to the topic, I think we are not completely out of the woods when it comes to pandemic. The last 2 years that we have witnessed have been unprecedented in terms of challenges. But like it said, never let a good crisis go waste. The entire experience of lockdown and work from home have compelled us to go digital on multiple fronts. We are living in a very much connected world where more than 500 million Indians are expected to come online for the first time in 2022. The data usage has grown 7 times since 2018. And of course, talking about what Supratim mentioned, right, that every organization has in varied form personal, sensitive, financial, health related data. So I think the industry understands and puts great value on, this topic of privacy and data protection and supports the entire endeavor that has been made to build the bill to the level where it is so far. we are in the process of bringing world closer, and therefore not only it helps us in the ease of doing business, but it's also equally important that we remain and elevate India as a good investment destination for the world. And therefore there will have to be a right balance between the flexibility and the free flow of data, the interoperability and the cost of compliances that we will mandate. The bill so far is, I mean, the industry is expecting that it should be compatible with the matured regulations, also like, meeting the thresholds for adequacy under the GDPR and vice versa, which will help the businesses and the overall digital trade. Now, if we look at the global regulations on this, there are mechanisms available, and maybe leveraging the standard contractual clauses and the binding corporate rules, or the frameworks like the EU-US Privacy Shield will probably help. So maybe a little bit nudge to look at those reciprocity benefits. In terms of data localization norms, I think what's proposed by the bill imposes an extraordinary cost on compliance. So while the final regulation will define what is sensitive and critical personal data, it would be nice to establish a minimum compliance standard, for example, on data storage, and so on and so forth. Now coming to the point of the regulation on the non-personal data and the personal data, whether it should be combined. I think the objective of personal data is to improve data privacy and security, while that of non-personal data is to generate more value from the data, to build trends, to build algorithms that will support the future. So keeping the two separate will probably help, not only in better compliance, but it will also ensure that neither of the framework is diluted, and the implementation of these compliances is easy instead of making it more complex. So probably it requires a little bit of deliberation on how we deal with the two. Overall, the data protection bill has seen multiple rounds of consultation and revision, and is shaping up in a very good direction. It would have been a very daunting task, I think, going back to again what Supratim was sharing, the journey that started from 2017 till date. So there's a lot of appreciation for the government's commitment to even proactively engage with the industry stakeholders. And I think all of us are excited to look at what the final bill will look like, and when this is notified, probably in 2022 itself. There will also be a need to develop and ramp up the expertise on the subject, to not only support the industry to comply and upkeep with the regulation, but to also support, for example, the impact assessments, audits, incident responses, breach management. So I think as an industry, the task is upon us to, start coaching and developing these kind of skill set. So when the bill is notified, we are ready in next 24 months for the compliance. And I think finally a huge acknowledgement to all the work that has gone behind, in providing the industry inputs, and for bringing it to the level where it is right now. So keeping it very short and succinct, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Mehta. And I'll now move on to the next speaker, Mr. Ashutosh Chadha, who is Director and Country Head, Government Affairs and Public Policy at Microsoft, to share with us his perspective.
Thank you very much, Smriti, and thank you very much, everybody, for this opportunity to talk about privacy. And as the speakers before me have talked about it, it's an extremely important area. But one of the things, I'm going to take a slight different approach to the conversation, which is talking about, while we're talking about privacy, I'm also going to be talking about regulatory coherence, right? We all are aware that privacy is going to be a rising concern, and there is now increasingly a larger societal expectation that personal information is extremely important, right? And obviously, privacy is going to be at the bedrock of technology adoption by both companies, organizations, countries, as well as individuals. And they will only use technology if they're sure that whatever information is being used, is being given by them over the internet or otherwise is secure. But at the same time, we also understand that we are in a global world. And as the speaker before me talked about, alluded to, that during the pandemic, it was ever so evident that technology has actually been the bedrock of our existence over the last 2 years, and that is required both has enabled us both from a commercial process perspective, a commerce perspective, as well as making sure our daily needs are met, right? But that has required information to flow not just outside from our houses, but across the cities, across borders, across national as well as international borders. And irrespective of the where the data flows, as everybody talks about it, privacy has to be adopted. But if I stop at that and I, look at what are the principles of privacy that we need to look at, there needs to be security, there needs to be control and management of that privacy. We need to be compliant as organizations, as companies, to the privacy rules and regulations or the laws of the land in whichever geography that one operates in. There has to be transparency and reliability in the services that we provide. But fundamentally, the tenets that privacy works on are three. You as the customer or the own your data. You control how it's being used. You know when it's being used and for what it's being used. And you also know where it's being stored. These are fundamental three precepts which we need to adhere to as organizations. And many countries are looking at these as the fundamental aspects that need to be addressed in the various privacy laws. And if I just step back and look at what's happening in Asia, we see a flurry of privacy reforms which are occurring, right? India, as we know, has been discussing this possibly between 2017 and 2018. Privacy has been declared as a fundamental right. We have multiple other countries who've got already privacy laws in place in the region, as well as globally, right? And hence, what we are seeing is that there is this increasing I wouldn't call it noise, but conversation around the importance of privacy, how it needs to be implemented, and how it needs to be actually regulated, not just within the country, but also across borders. Which brings me to the second point, which is why is there the need for regulatory coherence? And my previous speaker very clearly talked about the fact that there needs to be cross-border data flow. But I think the importance of cross-border data flow is underlined by the fact that we are all in a global community now. We have Indian companies who interact internationally, who provide services to countries globally, who provide solutions which are being used by multiple people across the world, and vice versa, right? And hence there needs to be regulatory coherence for three fundamental reasons. One, it'll ensure the customer that irrespective of where and what services he or she is getting those services from, there is trust in the process. The second, it will also enable regulators across the globe to talk to each other and ensure that they create laws and regulations which are harmonized with each other. But at the same time, while harmonization is very important, we need to make sure that we take care of the nuances of the laws of each country. There are certain nuances that we need to take care of, and those are important. And the third important thing is very important, very critically, organizations which are transnational in nature, which operate across the globe, right, need to be very sure that when they build solutions which can talk to each other and which can easily ensure that privacy doesn't get hampered. So we're increasingly seeing commonality actually amongst privacy laws, whether it is in terms of the data subject rights, whether it is in terms of the scope of what the regulatory authority can control and should control, whether it's around areas like the territorial and the sectoral approaches that we have, the fragmentation that we have, right? There is increasing convergence, and that is extremely important. We need to have this convergence, not just within the country, but also internationally. But there are areas of what you would say significant divergence which exist, where there are certain concepts which are there, which are written down, but still don't talk to each other effectively. And we need to be very careful as we are coming up with our law, as the report gets fructified, as the conversations continue with the government, as the industry, as civil society, as individuals, and the government, we need to make sure that this divergence across multiple laws as well as within the country actually converges to something which is not just protects our privacy, but also ensures innovation gets taken care of. It ensures that there is a harmonization with other countries' laws so that cross-border data flow and hence cross-border business and solutions, and most importantly, the impact of that business and solutions and citizens can be felt. So, so in the end, there are certain practical options for strengthening this privacy regulatory coherence. And I would just pick on three key areas. The first being cross-border data transfer mechanisms, because that's a reality. We live in a globalized world. Data, services, digital trade is going to be cross-border. We've seen that in the last 2 years more often than not, and it is the future. And we need to ensure that there is that harmonization. The second is around this area of data breach notification and the controls thereof. That's another area which we need to focus on as far as harmonization is concerned. And the last and most importantly is alternative grounds for processing data, especially when we look at things like legitimate interest. This becomes an extremely critical thing from two perspectives. One, data, while it is the new oil, it's not useful to anyone unless it's processed. And if at every stage you need to get explicit consent for processing it, imagine the amount of compliance regulatory pressure that every organization as well as data protection authorities across the globe will have to go through. So there needs to be a much more simpler way to enable processing of data while keeping privacy guidelines at the front of everything. The second important thing is that there are certain situations where you need to process data for the purpose of addressing cybersecurity risks, and you cannot wait for compliance or consent from each and every person to make sure that you're processing all these signals globally to address not just address cybersecurity risks, but also to preempt cybersecurity issues. And hence, what's important is to look at certain principles as we are working out our privacy guidelines, as we are working out on our privacy laws, to ensure that this regulatory coherence comes together, not just to ensure that we are able to drive transnational or cross-border trade, cross-border solutions, but also to ensure that we create what one will imagine will be a much more safe, consistent and secure digital ecosystem for all of us together. And I'll stop my talk here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chandra, for once again sharing with us your perspective and sharing with us that presentation. We now move on to our next speaker, Mr. Aman Jain, who will also be, in fact, sharing with us the industry perspective. And Mr. Jain is the Head of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google India. Over to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's already been a very interesting conversation. And firstly, I'd like to thank ASSOCHAM for bringing together an expert panel of speakers to discuss the state of privacy and data protection in India. And like I said, it's been an engaging discussion so far, and I look forward to more engaging conversations as the day goes on. This is really an opportune moment to take stock of global developments and privacy and consciously decide where we want to direct the conversation in India. Over the last 2 years, the internet has transformed the way we engage with each other, with businesses, with education institutions. You'd find this interesting. Today, they're among the most mobile-first consumers in the world, spending almost 5 hours a day online on average. For those who are relatively well acquainted with the internet and its services, many of the people on this panel, there is obviously acute awareness of topics like safety, security, and privacy. But for the newer novice users, these are entirely new concepts. Beyond consumers, the internet has also become the most critical enabler for businesses, the engine of continuity for the economy, becoming an integral part of India's economic growth agenda more than ever before. In this evolving digital context, privacy, data safety, responsibility have become an implicit requirement. These can no longer be afterthoughts in online products and platforms, but need to be foundational to their design and implementation. This change in our digital landscape calls for a need for regulations and a strong infrastructure to ensure that the digital economy can develop equitably. Regulation that reap the benefits of modern technologies and promotes innovation. Regulation that minimizes social costs and respects fundamental rights of citizens. As India prepares for a data protection law, we need to take a holistic view of how privacy regulation impacts society, on the potential impact across India's entire information system, and how regulation can support a dynamic marketplace of businesses of all types and sizes. At Google, we believe that privacy and data-led innovations that will fuel the digital economy are not at odds with each other. Both can grow hand in hand. I know many of you use Google products on a daily basis, whether it's search or maps or YouTube or Android, um, showing you your search results in the language of your choice or recommending the quickest route to work in the morning. These capabilities, Google's capacity to be helpful, depend in large part on Google's ability to do amazing things with data. So when people ask why Google collects and uses data in the first place, this is the answer. We make our products more helpful with data. At the same time, we ensure that we use data responsibly. We think that all people deserve to feel comfortable about how their data is being used, and that all entities that use personal information should be held accountable for protecting it. Privacy is built into our products from the get-go. As technology progresses and privacy needs evolve, we continuously work to meet changing user expectations. We have a responsibility to lead, whether we are investing in doing more for our users with less data or scaling our innovations to improve privacy protections across the internet. And as more people come online and digital engagements get more complex, there is a need for regulation to protect personal data and privacy of citizens. Regulation can keep users safe and at the same time support a dynamic marketplace for businesses. Back in 2018, Google developed a framework for responsible data protection regulation. Based on established privacy frameworks, our experience of providing services that rely on personal data, and our work to comply with evolving data protection laws around the world. These principles help us evaluate new legislative proposals and advocate for responsible, interoperable, and adaptable data protection regulations. We believe that responsible data can unlock benefits for people, companies, and other organizations, protect individuals and communities from harm and misuse of data, and help maintain the trust that enables innovation and change. On the data protection bill itself, at Google, we support a comprehensive baseline privacy regulation. We work closely with governments across the world as they have implemented privacy regulation, whether it be GDPR in the EU or the CCPA in California. We are now in the middle of a comprehensive parliamentary process on the Personal Data Protection Bill. The JPC has submitted its report to Parliament, and we are eagerly awaiting next steps in the process, including hopefully wider consultations with the industry on the shape of the final bill. We remain closely engaged with policymakers on how privacy regulation can support the globally distributed nature of modern internet businesses while promoting the goals of user privacy and safety. We also look forward to engaging with our leaders on data protection bill and discussing key elements of the draft bill, incorporating fundamental principles like consistency and interoperability to ensure that the new bill supports innovation and advances privacy and continues to make the what was mentioned earlier continues to set new records in creating unicorns in India and really help the startup ecosystem grow further. We need to think holistically on the potential impact of privacy regulation across India's entire information system and how regulation can support a dynamic marketplace. To that end, we remain closely engaged with the government as the final bill takes shape and look forward to working closely with the Data Protection Authority once it's set up on the implementation of law and the development of regulations and codes of practice. Finally, while policymakers continue to do their work, we will continue ours as well by challenging ourselves to make helpful products with less data and raise the bar on privacy for everyone. With that, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Look forward to an engaging discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jain, for talking to us. And as we come to almost an end of this inaugural session, I'd like to now invite Mr. Ashwini Rana, co-chairman of the ASSOCHAM National Council on IT, ITES, and E-commerce. He's also Public Policy Director at Meta India, to give the concluding remarks and also propose a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you. On behalf of ASSOCHAM and industry, I would like to thank all the speakers for taking their precious time out for the valuable insight that you shared with us. The SHM IT and ITES Council has provided a platform for the industry to work closely with government towards policy formulation for the accelerated growth of the sector, and will continue to work with industry in assimilating their concerns and aspirations as input to the government and regulators to facilitate enabling policies. I thank again all the delegates and friends from media, Secretariat, SHM for their support and attending this session. Thank you. Namaskar.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rana. We'd like to once again extend our heartiest gratitude to all of our speakers for sharing with us their perspectives. Each and every one of you, thank you for sparing some of your most valuable time and joining us for this inaugural session.